I'm from India, and my husband and I were recently invited to his subordinate's wedding in the Bay Area. I was really excited about it as it's the first American wedding I'm attending after moving to the States after my own wedding in February this year. I've seen quite a few reels and videos about not wearing white any colors that could resemble white like cream, eggshell, bone gray, pastel pink, silver, and definitely not red. I also made sure not to wear anything floor length, ball gown type and stuff. When we got the invitation, I checked up on the location, and it was a very beautiful, fancy place, and the dress code said, "Imagine a summer picnic in Naples," which was honestly so cute. I had a light green sleeveless dress which is flowy and goes up to my shin. I have hair that goes up to my hips, and I put a bow in it which was a little big, but I have thick hair, nothing which stands out. I didn't wear anything on my neck. I took off my Thali Mangal Sutra, which is this gold matrimonial chain that married women wear in India. The wedding was beautiful, and everything was fine until the reception. I kept getting weird side eyes from the bridal party and the mother of the bride. When my husband and I went to congratulate the couple, the bride completely ignored me, and her husband just gave me an awkward smile. I even went back and checked if my husband was allowed to bring a +1 because I thought I must not have been invited, and you can't just bring someone along to weddings here. 2 days after the wedding, one of the bridesmaids texted me on Instagram and told me if I was happy with the stunt I pulled at someone else's wedding. If I was such an attention-seeking intimacy worker that I had to wear something expensive to someone else's wedding and make them look bad, I was really upset, and I asked if I can call and solve this misunderstanding, because that was not my intention. The dress to begin with does not look like a bespoke piece or anything of that sort, but apparently one of the bridesmaids was aware of the design and who the designer was and told the bride and the bridal party. The designer does bridal pieces and formal everyday apparel too. I sent the bridesmaid my number and told her to call me at her convenience. Big mistake. She sent my number to the mother of the bride and others, and I've been getting some pretty nasty messages and phone calls. The groom is staying out of it because my husband is his boss, but sent me a message asking if I would apologize and if we could let this go. Honestly, if it was just an apology, I would have genuinely given it. But the name-calling and getting on a conference call to collectively berate me is wrong in my opinion. They put up pictures of me in the dress and pictures of the dress and its price on one of the bridesmaids' Instagram stories. She has a pretty good following to shame me as well. My husband wants to talk to the groom and set them straight, but I'm scared it might look like an abuse of power or something, and that would give them more crap to talk about. So, am I the idiot? And should I apologize for wearing a designer dress to a wedding? To add, the latest news I've received from another colleague's wife who I've met quite a few times since I've moved here is that not only was the dress too expensive, but since the designer also makes bridal pieces, and apparently the bride had checked out her website for a dress to wear the day after the wedding breakfast with only close friends and family, the dresses were out of her budget or she didn't like them, and she actually ended up wearing this sweet blush pink dress which looked absolutely beautiful on her. We saw pictures the next day, so one of the bridesmaids saw the dress I was wearing and told the bride that it's from the same designer, and I'm wearing an expensive bridal dress to another person's wedding, and all the drama started there. I made sure to tell them that this dress is not part of any bridal collection, but they just won't listen. Now for a few comments before the update. Comment 1. This is crazy behavior. Firstly, to be jealous of a guest's green dress is crazy. To message the wife of your friend's boss and call her an intimacy worker is frankly unhinged. If I was his boss, I'd fire him over this, to be honest. He should be groveling and apologizing for his wife and her friend's disgusting, unprofessional behavior. Absolutely one of the wildest things I've ever read on here. Honestly, I have to assume this might be rooted in racism. You made every effort to adhere to the expected norms, but they immediately jumped to you having some negative intent, like trying to outshine them. Why? Jealousy, insecurity, and possibly a bit of racism. Comment 2. Not the jerk. This reeks of insecurity. You did nothing wrong. Also, designer clothes wouldn't be able to transform a person into looking more attractive. I bet you are the type of beauty that would look gorgeous in a potato sack, hence the bride being jealous. Do people have no common sense, though? Why would you potentially jeopardize your husband's job by doing this? People normally invite their boss to get into their good graces and establish a better relationship. What a silly woman. Now, for the update, thanks for all the comments on my last post. So things have gotten even more complicated since then. After the initial drama, I thought it might die down, but I was wrong. The bridesmaids and the mother of the bride continued to harass me online, and it got to the point where I had to block several people on Instagram and Facebook. They even started tagging me in posts, accusing me of trying to upstage the bride intentionally. It was exhausting and really started to affect my mental health. My husband decided to step in and talk to the groom privately. He explained that the harassment needed to stop and that it was affecting both of us. The groom seemed understanding and promised to talk to his wife and her friends. For a few days, things were quiet, and I thought maybe it was finally over. But then, the bride herself sent me a long, angry message. She accused me of ruining her special day and demanded a public apology. She even suggested that I should reimburse her for the emotional distress I caused. I was at a loss. I didn't know what to do. My husband suggested we just ignore them and move on, but the constant messages and posts were hard to ignore. I felt trapped and didn't know how to make it stop. I even considered deleting my social media accounts altogether, but that felt like letting them win. Then something unexpected happened. One of the bridesmaids, who had been particularly nasty, showed up at my husband's workplace. She demanded to speak with him and caused a scene in the lobby. My husband was furious and had to call security to escort her out. This incident made things even worse because now it was affecting his professional life. His boss got wind of the situation and called him in for a meeting. My husband had to explain the whole ordeal, and while his boss was sympathetic, he warned my husband to keep personal issues out of the workplace. This was the tipping point for us. We decided to consult a lawyer to see if there was any legal action we could take to stop the harassment. The lawyer advised us to send a cease and desist letter to the bride and her friends. We did, hoping it would finally put an end to the madness. But instead of backing off, the bride posted the letter on social media, mocking us and calling us cowards for involving a lawyer. At this point, I was emotionally drained. I couldn't understand why they were so determined to make my life miserable over a dress. I started to question everything. Was it really just about the dress, or was there something deeper going on? I remembered a conversation I had with one of the bridesmaids at the wedding. She had mentioned how the bride felt insecure about her looks, and how she had always been overshadowed by her more glamorous friends. Maybe my dress was just the final straw in a long list of insecurities. But before I tell you more about that, let me explain what happened next. My husband and I decided to take a short trip to clear our heads. We went to a small town a few hours away and stayed in a cozy bed and breakfast. It was supposed to be a relaxing getaway, but even there we couldn't escape the drama. One evening, while we were having dinner, my phone buzzed with a notification. It was a message from an unknown number. When I opened it, my heart sank. It was a video of the bride and her friends, drunk and laughing, making fun of me and my dress. They had even gone to a bridal shop and tried on dresses similar to mine, mocking me the whole time. I felt humiliated and defeated. I showed the video to my husband, and he was livid. He wanted to go back and confront them, but I convinced him to stay. I didn't want to give them the satisfaction of knowing they had gotten to us. Instead, we decided to focus on our relationship and try to find some peace. During our trip, I had a lot of time to think. I remembered another incident from my past that seemed eerily similar. Back in India, before I got married, I had attended a friend's wedding. I wore a beautiful sari that my mother had given me. It was a family heirloom, and I was proud to wear it. But at the wedding, another guest, who was a distant relative, accused me of trying to show off. She said I was trying to make the bride look bad by wearing such an extravagant sari. I was shocked and hurt, but my mother told me to ignore her. She said some people are just jealous and insecure. Looking back, I realized that this situation was similar. The bride and her friends were projecting their insecurities onto me. They saw my dress as a threat because it reminded them of their own shortcomings. It wasn't really about the dress. It was about their own feelings of inadequacy. But understanding this didn't make it any easier to deal with. When we returned from our trip, the harassment continued. My husband and I decided to take a more drastic step. We filed a restraining order against the bride and her friends. It was a difficult decision, but we felt we had no other choice. The legal process was stressful, and we had to relive the entire ordeal in front of a judge. In the end, the restraining order was granted, but it came at a cost. My husband's relationship with his subordinate was irreparably damaged, and I felt like a pariah in our social circle. Thank you for reading. Am I the idiot for leaving my husband after discovering his secret subscriptions and neglecting our farm? I have recently quit my job, at his request. I suggested going part-time, to stay home full-time and look after our hobby farm, as my husband has recently gotten his absolute dream job. And that way he can focus completely on his work and not worry about the animals and farm. His job is in sales, this job is paid monthly, something neither of us has ever dealt with before. So I have also been put in charge of the budget to ensure we always have savings and don't run out of spending money, as we are also losing my wage. I noticed more money coming out of the account than should be, so I did some investigating to find that he has recently started paying for $380 in monthly subscriptions. One subscription I knew about, but has since doubled as he has now given his friend access to that account. The rest I knew nothing about. And when I tried to explain how bad it is that I didn't know about nearly $400 coming out of our account every month, he simply told me that they were work expenses and would be claimed back on tax, so we'll get the money back. So it's not a big deal. I then tried to explain tax offsets are not just refunded, but that they come out of your taxable income. We live in Australia, so he wouldn't get all of it back, but maybe 30%, which he would not listen to. He kept saying he's done this before and he knows what he's doing. The job I quit was literally for the Australian Taxation Office. My job was to inform people of exactly this kind of information. He would not listen, so I went back to trying to explain why I need to be told about expenses like these. 'Cause I'm in charge of the budget now. That I don't care about the subscriptions. I just care that I wasn't told. That I can't budget for the expenses I don't know about, and it'll be my fault if we run out of money before the end of the month. I even asked him last month for a list of all subscriptions. I even tried to put it into a work-related analogy so he might understand better. He refused to listen to me, speaking and yelling over me and not letting me get more than 5 words out. He told me to leave more than 3 times to just get out. I even told him that I would wait until he had taken the dog on their walk and calmed down, and then we could have a reasonable discussion. When he started throwing things around the house, I finally had enough and asked a friend if I could stay with her. When I was leaving, he chased after me, begging me to just talk about this, that he's the one that's been trying to talk and work on this. Why wouldn't I just talk about this? I told him I had given him 6 opportunities to talk, now or later, but he refused them all and just told me to get out of the house, that I've lost the plot and I needed to leave. So now I am leaving to have some time apart and think. He is now blaming me, saying our marriage is over. He can never get past this hurt and that I have abandoned him and the animals. He has mentioned the way I left made him look hurtful to the neighbors, and I feel like that's all he cares about, the perception others have of him. When I was leaving, he didn't say, I love you or I need you. All he said was, I need my wife, we're married. Am I the jerk for just leaving and not speaking with him when he decided to talk, after realizing I was leaving and causing a scene in the driveway? Am I overreacting about the extra money coming out of the account, even though he has said, if we get to 0, I'm blaming you more than once before? I am seeing the lack of communication and the nonchalance as something huge, and he sees it as nothing. He is seeing my leaving as something huge, even though he told me to leave multiple times, and I have explained it was for my mental health. Now for a few comments before the update. Comment 1. We live in Australia, so he wouldn't get all of it back, but maybe 30%, which he would not listen to. He kept saying he's done this before and he knows what he's doing. Your husband is a moron. I would not let this type of thing go. I would provide proof of how tax claims refunds work and expect him to swallow some humble pie and admit he was wrong. Stupid can be worked around. Stubborn can too. But the combination of stupid and stubborn is unworkable. When he started throwing things around the house, I finally had enough. Hell freaking no. Throwing things is domestic abuse. I'm not putting up with that for a second. He is seeing my leaving as something huge, even though he told me to leave multiple times. Did he mean leave the room, or leave me alone, or leave this relationship? I'm feeling a lack of honesty on this point. Comment 2. Chick, Aussie here. Get legal advice for divorce. He is going to have to pay you out. Are you on leave, pending leaving, or actual out of the public service? Regardless, you need a job again yesterday. He is only going to get worse. Get to Centrelink and see if there are any emergency payments you can apply for, seeing he has booted you from your home. If there are any savings, take half for you. Make sure you have your own bank account. You need to look after yourself and put yourself first. Now for the update. Hey everyone, thanks for sticking with me through all this. So after I left to stay with my friend, things got even more complicated. The first couple of days were a blur of emotions. I was angry, hurt, and confused. My friend was supportive, but I could tell she was worried about me. She kept asking if I was okay and if I needed anything, which was nice, but it also made me feel like I was a burden. I spent a lot of time just thinking about everything that had happened and trying to figure out what to do next. On the third day, my husband started texting me. At first, it was just to check on me and see if I was okay. But then the messages started getting more intense. He was apologizing one minute and then blaming me the next. He kept saying that I had overreacted and that I needed to come home so we could sort things out. I didn't know how to respond, so I just didn't. I needed more time to think. That night, my friend and I were sitting on her porch, and she asked me if I had thought about what I wanted. Not what my husband wanted or what anyone else thought I should do, but what I actually wanted. It was a simple question, but it hit me hard. I realized that I had been so focused on trying to fix things and make everyone else happy that I hadn't even considered my own feelings. The next day, I decided to go back to the house to get some of my things. I didn't tell my husband I was coming because I didn't want to deal with another confrontation. When I got there, the house was a mess. It was clear that he hadn't been taking care of the animals or the farm. I felt a pang of guilt, but I pushed it aside. I needed to focus on myself for once. As I was packing, I found a stack of papers on the kitchen table. They were bills and bank statements, and it was obvious that my husband had been struggling to keep up with everything. I felt a mix of anger and sadness. He had put us in this situation, but he was also clearly overwhelmed. I decided to take the papers with me so I could go through them later and see if there was anything I could do to help. When I got back to my friend's house, I started going through the papers. It was worse than I thought. There were late fees and overdraft charges, and it was clear that we were in a lot more financial trouble than I had realized. I felt a wave of panic, but I tried to stay calm. I needed to figure out a plan. I spent the next few days going through everything and trying to come up with a budget that would work. It was tough, but I felt like I was finally taking control of the situation. I also started looking for part-time work. I knew that going back to my old job wasn't an option, but I needed to bring in some income to help us get back on track. During this time, my husband kept texting and calling. He was still all over the place emotionally, and it was exhausting. I decided to meet with him to talk things through. We met at a coffee shop, and it was awkward at first. He apologized again for everything, and I could tell he was sincere. But he also kept making excuses and blaming me for leaving. It was frustrating, but I tried to stay calm. I told him about the financial mess I had found and the budget I had come up with. He seemed surprised, like he hadn't realized how bad things were. We talked for a long time, and by the end of it, I felt like we had made some progress. He agreed to let me handle the finances and promised to be more transparent about expenses. But there was still a lot of tension between us. I could tell he was still hurt and angry about me leaving, and I was still upset about how he had treated me. We decided to take things one day at a time and see how it went. Over the next week, things were up and down. Some days were good, and we were able to talk and work together. Other days were tough, and it felt like we were back to square one, but I was determined to make it work, and I could tell he was trying too. One night, we were sitting on the porch, and he started talking about his job. He admitted that he was feeling a lot of pressure and that he had been taking it out on me. He said he was sorry and that he wanted to do better. It was a small step, but it meant a lot to me. We still have a long way to go, but I feel like we're starting to make progress. I'm still staying with my friend for now, but we're talking more and trying to work things out. It's not easy, but I'm hopeful that we can get through this. Thanks for reading. Am I the idiot for cutting off my toxic mother-in-law after she tried to sue us for grandparents' rights? My husband has always had a tumultuous relationship with his mother. He'd always been treated as a disappointment, whereas his sister was the princess. If it were up to him, we'd have no contact with her whatsoever. We have 2 girls, 17 and 14. Family has always been important to me as I was raised by a single mom and only had one other sibling. My mother passed 11 years ago, so my mother-in-law is all they have as a grandmother. Any time we spend with her is only because I facilitate it. She's loud, rude, and obnoxious. As the girls have gotten older, they've requested that she not attend sports events because she will be quite vocal and downright hurtful to officials. I've told her countless times that if she doesn't behave herself, the girls and teams will be penalized. Her go-to response? "But I'm Nana," and laughs it off. My sister-in-law is not as bad as my mother-in-law, but she absolutely has a very high and mighty attitude. If she feels you are not worthy enough to be in her life, she will cut ties. A few years ago, she married a well-off man and had a son. Since then, she's systematically cut off almost the entire family, including us, as we don't bring value to her future. My daughters were devastated by this, as they had grown close to my sister-in-law and don't understand why she'd stop talking to them. My mother-in-law is very involved in the life of my sister-in-law and her son. Anytime we see her, she monopolizes the conversations with talks of my sister-in-law and her son. If the girls try to tell her about accomplishments they've made, it's countered with, "Well, that's okay, grandson did." Even on birthdays or special occasions, my mother-in-law will bring them up and make it the sister-in-law and son show. Most recently, our youngest made her confirmation. My mother-in-law met us outside the church and immediately said, "I slept over at my sister-in-law's house and grandson didn't want me to leave. He said, 'You stay with me, Nana. Here. This is a cross made out of 24K gold. It was really expensive.' Our youngest is graduating and really doesn't want my mother-in-law there. I've told my mother-in-law that if the graduation is being held inside due to bad weather, we've only got 3 tickets, but I would forward her the link to the live stream. She laughed and said, 'I'll be there.' I reiterated to her that my husband, myself, and her sister will be using the 3 tickets. She coined her famous phrase of, 'I'm Nana, I'll get in.' This statement sent my daughter into a tailspin. She started to cry, saying that she was scared that my mother-in-law was going to cause a scene trying to get in without a ticket and ruin her day. My husband feels that with his mother's actions, she is trying to get our girls to compete with his sister and nephew for her love. His solution is to cut her off from us completely. So, am I the jerk for telling my mother-in-law not to come to the graduation if it's held inside? Now for a few comments before the update. Comment 1. Stop holding on to this ridiculous notion that just because she's the only grandparent left, she needs to be in your children's lives. Your children don't want her. Your husband doesn't want her. Please start listening to your family and stop wanting her. She is awful, and you really need to see that your adult husband and almost adult children should come first here. If you don't tell her where, when things are happening, she won't know about them, and therefore won't go and ruin things for your nuclear family and friends. As for the graduation, lie and tell her the date has changed. You owe it to your daughter to do this. Comment 2. My mom was like you, forcing a relationship because family is important, instead of it being my paternal grandmother, though it was my paternal grandfather. The man was vile. As soon as I turned 18, I went no contact, and my mom still tried to push a relationship with him. You're not doing your husband or daughters any favors by forcing them to have a relationship with your mother-in-law. So, I'm going to say, you're the idiot. You shouldn't have forced a relationship just because you feel family is important. If your husband wanted no contact with her, you should have respected that. Now for the update. Hey everyone, a lot has happened since my last post. After the whole graduation ticket fiasco, things took a turn for the worse. My mother-in-law did show up at the graduation, despite not having a ticket. She tried to talk her way in, using her usual "I'm Nana" line, but the security was strict and didn't let her through. She made a scene, yelling and causing a commotion, which embarrassed my daughter and upset the whole family. My daughter was in tears, and it really put a damper on what should have been a happy day. But that was just the beginning. My husband decided enough was enough and told his mother that we were cutting off contact with her. He was firm and clear, but she didn't take it well. She called him ungrateful and accused me of turning him against her. She even tried to guilt trip him by saying he was depriving her of her granddaughters. My husband stood his ground, but it was a tough and emotional confrontation. In the days that followed, my mother-in-law started showing up unannounced at our house, demanding to see the girls. We had to call the police twice to get her to leave. It was stressful and scary for all of us, especially the girls. They were already dealing with the emotional fallout from the graduation incident, and now they had to deal with their grandmother's erratic behavior. Meanwhile, my sister-in-law got wind of what was happening and decided to weigh in. She sent a long, condescending email to my husband, accusing him of being disrespectful to their mother and saying that he was setting a bad example for our daughters. She also mentioned that her son was upset because he missed his Nana, which felt like a low blow considering everything we were going through. My husband was furious and hurt by his sister's email. He felt betrayed and unsupported by his own family. It brought up a lot of old wounds and unresolved issues from his childhood. He confided in me that he always felt like the black sheep of the family, and this situation just confirmed it for him. He was struggling with feelings of inadequacy and rejection, and it was heartbreaking to see him so vulnerable. As if things weren't bad enough, my mother-in-law decided to take legal action. She filed for grandparents' visitation rights, claiming that we were unfairly keeping her from her granddaughters. We had to hire a lawyer and prepare for a court battle. It was a stressful and expensive process, and it took a toll on all of us. During this time, my daughters were dealing with their own emotional struggles. They were confused and hurt by their grandmother's actions, and they didn't understand why she was causing so much trouble. They missed the good times they had with her, but they also felt betrayed by her behavior. It was a lot for them to process, and we had to get them into therapy to help them cope. In therapy, some old family secrets came to light. My husband revealed that his mother had always been emotionally hurtful, and that he had spent his entire childhood trying to win her approval. He had never felt good enough, and it had left deep scars. This revelation helped me understand why he was so determined to cut her off, but it also made me realize how much pain he had been carrying all these years. The court case dragged on for months, and it was a constant source of stress and anxiety. My mother-in-law was relentless, and she used every trick in the book to try to win. She even tried to turn the girls against us, sending them letters and gifts and making them feel guilty for not wanting to see her. It was a manipulative and cruel tactic, and it caused a lot of tension in our household. In the end, the court ruled in our favor, but the damage was already done. The whole ordeal had taken a toll on our family, and it left us feeling drained and defeated. My husband was struggling with his mental health, and our daughters were still dealing with the emotional fallout. We were all trying to pick up the pieces and move forward, but it was a slow and painful process. Looking back, I realized that my mother-in-law's behavior was a pattern that had been going on for years. She had always been manipulative and controlling, and she had always tried to pit family members against each other. My husband had spent his entire life trying to please her, and it had left him with deep emotional scars. It was a painful realization, but it also helped us understand why things had gotten so bad. As we tried to rebuild our lives, we made a conscious effort to focus on our own family and to create a healthy and supportive environment for our daughters. We set boundaries and made it clear that we would not tolerate any more toxic behavior from my mother-in-law or my sister-in-law. It was a difficult and painful process, but it was necessary for our own well-being. Thank you for reading. If you liked this video, you'll probably like these too. Also, while you're here, please consider subscribing. It's your support that keeps this channel alive and allows me to make better and longer videos. Have a great day!